Chancellor.
I go by the name of Chris.
And ladies and gentlemen, today we have with us the Assistant Professor of Arts at the University of Southern Mississippi, Professor Chen, who is
a Master of Ceramics today
on the Creative Brief. Okay, for those of you who don't know what the Creative Brief is, it's when we hang out with fellow creatives and creative professionals, hear their stories, share insight about their processes, and gain knowledge to help you through your creative journey. And without further ado, Professor Chen, how are you?
I'm great.
Yeah?
Yes.
Thanks for being here.
Yes, love to be here, yes.
Thanks for taking the time out of your evening and being with us today. For those that don't know you, give us a little bit of a backstory on who you are, what you do.
Sure. Well, I teach art at the University of Southern Mississippi. I was hired about 5 years ago, so this is my my 5th year, going for my tenure, turning in September. So I was born in Taiwan and grew up in California from age 12. Actually, immigrated there, and got my master's at University of Notre Dame.
Okay.
And then kind of bounced around all over the place as a fine artist would tend to do with a sculpture degree. And then got this job 5 years ago, so here I am. So.
Very nice. Talk to me about the bouncing. What happened with the bouncing? Was it still focused on sculpturing? Was it focused on arts?
Oh yeah. So I got my my master's fine arts in ceramics.
Okay.
Well, officially it's called studio arts, but I did ceramics, pottery, working with clay, and most fine artists with studio art degree, once you get your master's, it's quite hard to get a tenure track teaching job because they're very competitive. A lot of people graduate MFAs and there's only so many jobs. So as a result, especially if you're a ceramicist, you need studio, you need kilns, you need space, you need a lot of equipment, very expensive. So one of the best ways to continue making work is to look for residencies. It's basically like an internship, but they also provide living space so you can be completely immersed in that place. And because of that, you kind of, for me, I just kind of apply carpet bomb the entire country, literally all over the world. Like there are ones in Denmark, there are ones in Japan and China and everything, wherever they can find a place to feed me and keep me going. So because of that, after graduate school, they're not exactly knocking on my door, just like, please work for me. It's like, no, it was, I was applying to all these jobs all the time and couldn't land a job until like 3 years after I got my master's. So
you ended up here, South Mississippi.
Yes, actually, yeah. I mean, I grew up in California, so, you know, if I talk to friends I haven't talked to in a while, they'd be like, what do you do in Mississippi? It's like, well, you know, I got a job here and everything. Yeah. But so many people that are majors in ceramics that are teaching, I feel like they have similar stories of wherever they end up is because they were able to find a teaching job, which is really, really fantastic.
That seems to be kind of the norm for academia is once you graduate and then you kind of just apply and you look and see where you're needed, where your specialty is needed, and kind of go there and commit and then see how you're kind of expanding what it is that you're doing in that academic field, right? That's
a perfect way to put it. In that way, it's very selective then, because not everybody is able to move like myself. Right. So that cuts down the pool of applicants available. And then after that, like how young are you or how good you are and how much experience you are, and it keeps falling down to a very select few that are able to do what we do. Yeah. So I hear from Chris that you're not just good, like you're a badass when it comes to throwing that clay. Right? Oh my gosh.
Is that right?
Like in class, he would do something so elegant and looks so easy, and he throws us on the wheel, and I'm just throwing clay. For the first 4 weeks of class, I was drenched in just mud, basically.
Chris, why didn't you say any of this while you were my student? I'm so sorry for giving you that D. You know, it was fun, we could have talked about this now.
So tell us a little bit about what that's like being a professor for other students, especially in a creative field where, you know, I feel like you have to set the boundaries of what is appropriate and what's good. And so what is that like?
I love how you asked that. It's many things. To be able to tell you what it's like being a professor, you know, I'll take over. I'm still talking about figuring it out. Yeah. But in terms of what's appropriate and setting boundaries, that was one of the things that took a lot of energy to figure out, because myself, you know, I'm very introspective and kind of have a lot of I don't know, nervousness about how I come off. And I don't have the best filters either. And I enjoy just be kind of spontaneous when I talk to people. And I enjoy making friends. But I quickly realized that there's got to be a relationship established that I'm a professor. And these are students that are not my friends. But the most natural thing you want to do is to make friends with people because so many of my students are very likable people. Chris is very difficult to be like. I just kind of want to hang out with him. Yeah, it's
okay. I do what I can.
as you know.
He's okay, you know?
So yeah, it's not always easy for me, but not for bad reason because I want to make friends with students, but at the same time trying to make sure I'm doing my job. So
and being able to provide them with enough value for them to take what it is you teach them and apply it. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
So has it been difficult going from creative to teaching people in that creative element?
I wouldn't say it's difficult to go from creative to teaching people. I feel like it's very easy. The difficulty would be not having enough time to do one or the other. Because if I'm teaching students, you spend so much time, it could really consume you. It could really, really consume you because students that are interested like Chris, he could ask you question after another and they can keep improving and they'll never stop needing you. And me, I feed off of that. I love when people are interested in what I am interested in. So I could give all myself to that. And then it leaves much less time for you to make your own work. A lot of professors, especially in fine arts, struggle with that a little bit. I wouldn't say struggle, but they have to figure out boundaries to be able to make work and teach at the same time.
That was interesting because like when we were going through class, I wouldn't see Professor Chen practicing or like actually doing the ceramics that much because he's actually coaching all of us. But you would come back to class the next day, and at some point throughout the day or some point throughout the night or the weekend or whenever, you would have like beautiful pieces made, ready to go in kiln when we wanted to go in kiln. So it's interesting that you were finding the balance between personal craft and actually teaching and honing other skill. And I think that's a pretty admirable trait, but that is difficult to actually do. So.
Yeah. Well, thank you again. I know this podcast is about me, but let's talk about me more. Like, what else amazing thing that I do? Just 20 more minutes.
I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready at all. No, I do want to talk about you more. If that's okay. We're gonna get into it. For me, I was a TA at Southern, and I was a good student. I'm not trying to brag, but I knew how to student. If you know what that means. Like some students just know how to student. Transitioning into being a graduate student and having to teach undergrads was completely eye-opening because there's a difference between understanding your craft and doing it yourself and then translating that for other people to be able to understand it and do it. Has that honed your craft because you have to know it so well that you explain it in a way that's understandable?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know where I read it, but it's like a common process that to be able to teach somebody is one of the best way to learn how to do something. I don't know, Andre Agassi was not a very good coach, but he's a phenomenal player. Michael Jordan's not a very good coach historically, but he's the greatest player of all time. So, well, wait, that goes against my point. I was trying to say that in order to be good at something. So edit that out, maybe. But I feel like by trying to explain to a student how to throw something, the mechanics of doing something, I'll be like, oh, wait, that is how I would do it. So in that way, it does help you understand more how to do something by having to explain it to somebody else.
And what do students struggle with? Especially, and I want to focus on creative because there's a lot of subjectivity with creativeness. And I'm assuming you have to develop processes to teach them. So what do they struggle with whenever you're teaching them? And why is it difficult for them to catch like those ideas?
So in terms of creativity, and that's such a good question because it's a very hard question to answer. Depends on the student what they struggle with. It seems like if a student's struggling with creativity, that is probably the hardest struggle for me to work with because I find motivation and creativity to be very close second cousins to each other. That if a student is very creative, they seem to always be motivated to do the things they want. And going back to what you're talking about, to be able to balance out your life between teaching and making things is difficult. However, I don't find it that it's hard to do because I want to do those things. So that because I'm motivated to do those things. So if a student is motivated to be creative, then that student you're lucky to have a student like that. But when a student is not, it's difficult. It's hard to figure out. I think you try to find creative ways to getting to know them better. And like, what are you interested in? What are you motivated at? Please give me something you're motivated. Give me something. And then try and relate that and bring that into their work.
I'm super empathetic to that because for some reason, that to me translates to our client work as well, is whenever we're pitching to a client or whenever or a client comes to visit us, we have to kind of really understand what's the root of what they're looking for and why they want what they want, and try to like translate that through our creative outlet. But in regards to what you just said, what have you found is kind of a theme across students in general that they have difficulty with when it comes to ceramics in particular?
Well, the common thread as far as having difficulties, I guess it still depends on the student, but some of the general ones is that if a student hits an obstacle, pretty immediately you'll see it starts to separate certain students that when they meet obstacles, they will have what's called grit. And they would just keep hitting at it. Some students can attempt 2 or 4 or 5 times and they overcome it. Some students will stop about 2 times. I mean, the students that stop at the first time, that you don't really talk about because it's unfortunate. They just don't find motivation to do that. So that's where it is, to be able to pick yourself back up and try again.
Yeah. So it's almost like overcoming failure.
Because
that is, in the creative field, that's a big thing. We're scared of conflict, and we're scared to present to clients, and we're scared to fail because we're afraid of what somebody else might think, and we project that out in our work. And I mean, because I've seen it particularly in ceramics, because it is a different
I was about to say, it is a dark world.
I mean, but it is a difficult thing to learn if you're fresh, like you have no idea what you're going into, and to try something new. And you're going to fail at it. That's just part of the process. But to try something new and to fail, but to want to hone that skill is, self-driven, and it really comes from within. Right. So I empathize with that, because it was a struggle for me, to start. But I knew it was something I wanted to do. Like, I really wanted to learn some aspect of it, even if it wasn't applicable to my life. Yeah. But it's applicable in a different way, because it helped me push through failures, and it helped show me that I can actually learn something that I have no idea on how to start or finish, but by the end of it, kind of be, in the realm of it. So it's kind of neat.
Can I use Christopher as an example? I was just thinking as you're talking. I remember Chris in Ceramics 2. Did you take it up to Ceramics 2? Yeah. I found Chris to be very talented in my class. He had a great personality too, as well. Very fun to be around. I thought him to be very mature in terms of just having a good, positive attitude. Certain students, when they're struggling, they will let other people know it. And when, as a teacher myself, I seem to be susceptible to that. Christopher never let that, affect in any negative way. When it comes to throwing on the wheel, I thought he was a natural. Like, he had really good hand-eye coordination, was able to center that clay pretty immediately, was able to pull very large. And so for me right there, I started, feeling 2 things. Number 1, focus on the part that he's really good at. Number 2, I hope he doesn't finally hit an obstacle and then not push through, because you have so much talent. And I feel like almost in a way that things were coming so easily for Christopher on the wheel. I don't know why I'm calling you Christopher, because you're just Chris, but things were coming so easy to you. It's like, oh my gosh, hope when he hits his first hiccup, I hope it happens soon in a weird way. And so that he gets it, it's not all that easy. He doesn't give up or something. So
that's the thing. People get so comfortable at being, either like naturally gifted, or you have, like, failure is important. I believe failure is important. Yeah. And if that's one takeaway that I'm getting from this, because it helps humble you, one, and it helps show you that you can overcome an obstacle. Yeah. And it helps, like, put you in a better light to even want to learn more, or realize you don't know everything. And that was that happened with me a good bit. And particularly is when he asked us to make plates one day, which was a different technique style. And I remember when I told everybody plates were due like the next day. And usually when you're doing ceramics, you have to throw, you have to let stuff dry, you have to carve. that takes days. Plates to do the next day. And I'm there with 0 plates. And I'm like, hey, I have to throw like 15 plates. And I remember every student was like, you can't do that. Like, that's not a possible thing. And me, I'm like, well, it has to get done.
Yeah.
Like, it has to, I'm going to fail through it.
Yeah. Or
I'm going to learn from it. And it helped me. Surprisingly, I actually got it, done. And I actually learned from that to like, and it helped. Ceramics is a lot about time management.
I feel like life is about time management.
Yeah.
That's what school does for you.
This is really, really interesting to me now, Chris, to hear you talk about it. Because at the time I was thinking, like that semester, you were super busy with graphic design. You graduated and everything. So you were not showing up to a lot of classes. I tried to talk to you.
But it was the absolute.
But I was trying to tell you, like, Chris, you got to come to class. And I was trying to be real with him. Like, hey, you have everything it takes to get an A in my class. You're not going to get an A anymore. But please keep showing up in my class. But with that plate thing, I was thinking that you thought that you were so good at the wheel that you're going to knock him out in one night.
Man, no.
So it sounds like you literally just didn't have time. Okay.
I did not. I did not have time, but I did not know how to do it when I sat down. And that almost terrified me because I was like, that was like the mini failure that happened.
You didn't show that at all. I didn't know. Like I said, he never showed any negativity. Had he let me know that he was actually afraid, I would have pulled him aside. Like, oh, I could show you how to throw these plates. Yeah, they're far easier than your cylinders.
I sat there and studied video, looked at.
Oh, that's what
I filmed Professor Chen like once when he do it. And I would sit there and be like, there's some particular thing that I'm missing. Yeah. But it's just that dedication to honing the craft and actually trying to put in the effort because I genuinely love ceramics and I hate that I don't do it anymore. But it's actually something that's an amazing creative outlet and it's something that's a lot of fun and something that, you get to actually make something that's yours. You put your name on something that you've created from hand and whether you give it to somebody else, whether you keep it, it's like a little part of you.
Yeah.
I think that's a big thing. Yeah. I think that's a big thing about the creative journey.
I saw a video of you throwing and I was run that back because I need to watch that again.
He just
That's exactly it.
But you guys both touch on something, and I want to talk about them separately. I think sometimes in the example of Chris, once you're dedicated on a personal level, you kind of thrive to find outlets beyond just your professor. Yeah. So I want to ask you, given the change in the paradigm of how people consume knowledge now, or consume information, excuse me, do you think that education's place in the creative field is still as prominent as it was before? Do you think that people need a formal education to kind of put themselves in a creative field or not?
Oh man.
And why? I really want to hear it.
Sure. I feel like you can make just as valid argument for both sides. You are right. Everything at your fingertips is making a lot of things slowly become obsolete because they're free essentially. They're readily accessible to you at any time you want. And those are definitely two positives compared to paying the tuition that you are for a university. So I guess it comes down to what the university does or formal education does in response to that. What can they provide that the shifting paradigm cannot so far? And I would argue that I guess in the ceramic field is that, the pottery wheel, the one-on-one tutoring and teaching, and the fact that you get to be with other students and interact with them, to be able to use the facility, that so far is still not reachable on your phone. Maybe in the graphic design, you can watch tons of YouTube videos and learn how to use Photoshop or Illustrator to do things that you need to. But being at university in class, you get to have mentorship, and you get to have networking. These professors that work in the fields, they write you a letter of recommendation to help you get jobs and things like that. And being able to work with other people alongside of you, there's a synergy that happens that perhaps that so far as I know, the new paradigm hasn't been able to provide.
That is true. I think the only reason why I enjoyed school as much as I did was because of my peers, especially at the graduate level when you're just there for like 3 to 4 hours with the same people in the same room. And it's more of a critical discussion than it is just, okay, this is the assignment, everybody do the assignment and get to work. So I do agree with you there. Have you found that to impact you at all? Like on on your individual creative journey has being a professor and having that synergy and having that network helped you at all?
Oh yeah, it's essential. In fact, particularly in ceramics, because it takes a lot of people to fill a kiln, and you always need help to do a lot of things. So I would say within the arts, the medium a lot of times have um, uh, their own formula for how much community it's based. So, for instance, my old professor used to say, like painter, they're a lot more solitude. It's like me, deep in my thoughts, working through a lot of concepts in my painting for a month at a time. Yeah. Pottery, you need a community. Like you making your pots by yourself, but you can load a kiln with other people and fire a kiln with other people, and it's very communal. Even the work that you made, cups and bowls, and to have a meal together and things like that. So for me, it's been essential to be in a community in academia. Nice. But sometimes kind of think about, what about people who are not in academia and do work in clay? Is it one of those things where to hammer everything's a nail? Maybe I only see from my perspective. I don't know. I guess I have studio potter friends. I guess they do need clientele and they do need community to support him too. And so I'm not sure if I'm really answering your question.
I think you did. Yes. Yeah. What would you, touching on the people that don't have a formal education
or
are in academia, what would you recommend to them? Because there's probably a lot of people watching that are hearing this and like, oh, and they're on the cuff, right? Maybe you have high schoolers that are saying, well, I'm deciding on college, or should I just go and learn it on my own? What would you recommend for those that are deciding to go on their own?
I would say it depends on what it is you want to do with this art. So I think the reason why you want to, get a finance degree in ceramics from a university, I really think is because if you have interest in becoming a teacher. I feel like it's kind of narrow, but getting a job specifically that's ceramics, working with clay related, it is quite narrow because we're in 21st century, and although we use ceramic products, they're all machine made, and simply making handmade stuff is obsolete. So you're really looking for a very narrow clientele and a narrow field of work. So to get in academia, I would argue that it's because you want to be a teacher. Or if you want to be a studio potter, you really could just take you can take lots of workshops and learn a lot of these on your own. So I probably shouldn't be saying this because I'm a teacher.
No, say your truth. Speak your truth. I have one last question before we wrap up, but you had something?
Let me add an addendum to why we should exist. So the reason why ceramics classes should be offered in university, one powerful reason is because if you want a well-rounded graduate of a university, you want them to be able to read and write and be able to do math and be socially conscious. That's what it takes, sociology. And in that vein, taking art classes will make you more cultured and everything. And I also argue that there simply is no replacement for you to have your hands dirty, working with that clay, having that personal connection, to feel, not to be overly romanticized about it, but to feel like a kid playing again, being human and stuff like that. Like you can hire somebody else to build a house for you. You can hire somebody to do a painting for you much better than you can ever do. But there is the part where you build the house yourself, you paint the painting yourself, make your own pots. That experience, that tactile experience, is an experience that you get to have and you get to enjoy. You actually get to enjoy that you don't want to have somebody else do for you. So that's what I'll say.
No, that's a powerful addendum, an addendum we're going to end on. Okay? I'm going to give a quick recap on you touched on some big points.
But I still want to talk about me for another couple hours. Yeah.
Do we have time?
I'm totally kidding. I'm kidding.
We have no time.
Thanks, Chris.
Uncovering anything else. But no, you touched on some great things that I want to recap for the audience, which seems to be a recurring theme here, is being able to overcome failure even in a setting that is staged to a degree, right? There's going to be things that you have to overcome on your own, even if you have guidance from someone like Professor Chen. Another thing is, once you encounter that failure, there's a level of grit that has to be involved, and you have to make a decision whether or not you're going to go forward or whether you're just going to let that failure consume you. And that's going to be across the board in any creative outlet, whether it's ceramics or if you're somebody that, like us, does videography or branding. Another thing that he touched on that we kind of covered very quickly is perspective. You have to be able to have perspective in regards to what it is you're doing and seeing that there is beyond just where you're at the stage of where you're at and what you're doing. So being able to kind of shift your perspective to where it allows you to overcome that failure and allows you to have that grit is really important. Another thing is focus on your strengths. I think we talked about that when he was talking with you. You may not like it. You may not enjoy what you're doing, and that's okay, but recognizing that, and if you're in an academic setting where you have to get through it because you need those credit hours and you need to get that degree, push it through. But when you're focusing, for example, on a career, expand on your strengths and don't try to kind of amplify areas where you're weak. The biggest thing is building a community, and I think that's where academia really strives, is it gives you that arena to network with people. It almost obligates you to network,
right,
which is powerful, and you don't usually have that opportunity. And if you are in the academic sphere, learn to network when you have the chance, because adulting is hard outside of the academic sphere when it allows you to do it. And the last thing is really understanding yourself when it comes to the creative and being able to recognize where you are in the process, what you need in the process, and how to kind of continue throughout that process. So that's it.
Absolutely.
Master Chen.
That was amazing. You summed it all up.
Professor Chen, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for dedicating the time and sharing some of this master throwing knowledge right here, you know? But ladies and gentlemen, if you know what to do, hit the like button. What else do they need to do, Chris?
If you disliked it, then double tap the dislike button.
Facts. Double tap the dislike button. Share, subscribe, and comment. Comment down below what it is you want us to talk about, what areas of creative most interest you, and what kind of insight you'd like to gain from our channel. The questions help us kind of dictate what kind of content we create for you. So other than that, we will see you on the next one. Okay?
Absolutely.